Submitted for the approval of Howl-O-Scream, I call this story The Mysterious Krusty the Cat Animatronic. I'm sure you're familiar with Chuck E. Cheese. Chuck E. Cheese, Helen Henny, Mr. Munch, Jasper T. Giles, and Pasquale the Chef. Whether you had a birthday party as a kid there or learned about them during the Five Nights at Freddy's boom doesn't matter. What you probably didn't know was Krusty the Cat. Krusty was an extremely short-lived character from the first Chuck E. Cheese Pizza Time Theater. He was a cat character who didn't click with the higher-ups, so they got rid of him and replaced him with Mr. Munch. That was that, and most people had seen him during his brief run at the restaurant simply forgot about him and assumed he'd been lost to time. His animatronic probably just tossed out or never thought of again. But what people didn't know was that when they were making life-size animatronics of the Chuck E. Cheese animatronics, they made a life-size Chuck E. Cheese Krusty the Cat animatronic as well, that was never released to the public because of Mr. Munch, and and was supposedly locked away in a back room of the restaurant, just to decay and rust, while the portrait version of him was tossed out into the dumpster. However, in 1985, Brian, a young man who worked at a Chuck E. Cheese location, finally caught a glimpse of Krusty the Cat himself one night in the restaurant during his evening trash run. This was of course impossible, as the portrait stage had been removed 10 years ago. Brian checked with his supervisor and he told him that he witnessed the employees destroying the Krusty the Cat animatronic with a baseball bat behind the restaurant back in '87. Brian, convinced the sign was just his imagination, went about his business as usual, till he got to the dumpsters outside. Sitting on top of the dumpster was the Krusty animatronic, slumped over and lifeless, as if it had been removed that afternoon. Brian immediately went to fetch the supervisor, but Krusty was gone by the time they returned. After this, no one heard anything about Krusty until 1996. Emily Williams, a manager in Arizona Chuck E. Cheese, claims to have heard a voice in the restaurant from the control room for the stage saying,
Pixie, music please.
assuming it was just part of the show, Emily just decided to ignore it and went about her day as per usual. When she walked past again, a few hours later, she heard the voice again saying,
I hold it like a jukebox. I called my mother to have you.
The thing was, though, that it was 10 p.m., and the main show had been off for quite a while now. So, with curiosity, and thinking that it was just a TV left on, she decided to head inside the control room for the animatronic show stage, and looked inside and saw Krusty the Cat positioned inside the room, while his animatronic standing and all, looking like he had always been there. Now this particular store had a free stage setup, and was a Showbiz Pizza originally, not a Pizza Time theater, so there was no way the store could have a Krusty the Cat animatronic. Emily had heard of Krusty before, but had never seen him. She just assumed that he was some sort of prototype character that the corporate was testing and ignored him. Now you may be jogging these all things off as people seeing ghosts. However, there is a dark side to the story. Brian was arrested a week after he saw Krusty the Cat for attempting to murder his manager with a bat, shouting, "Go ball, Mr. Jenkins!" Emily Williams attempted to burn down her Chuck E. Cheese a few years later as well. Both Brian and Emily pleaded not guilty and said Krusty the Cat did it, to no avail. This was investigated, but ruled as a freak coincidence, simply passed off, since Krusty was nothing more than a defunct pizza mascot. This brings us to 2017, when I decided to spend a few minutes at a local Goodwill after my shift at Chuck E. Cheese's, where I worked as an animatronic maintenance man. After spending a few minutes browsing the old movies, something caught my eye. It was a large black cat animatronic wearing a swinger's jersey with the number 13 on it and holding a cardboard baseball bat in its hand. A small nameplate was attached to the cat on it underneath all that fur that said Crusty the Cat. When I walked over, I saw the animatronic's eyes following me as I approached. Left, right, left, right. This was really unsettling, but maybe I could fix the robot and make it brand new. I reached around the back of it and realized there was no connections to it. I went to the manager and asked how much for the animatronic when I heard a voice come over the PA.
Nothing that you said, nothing. You should make me a star today, yeah.
I looked around determined to see who was it. I didn't understand how no one could notice, since after all, an animatronic cat coming to life was something that was unnatural. But despite the fact that it spoke, no one paid it any mind. It was completely bizarre, and it stared at me menacingly with those animatronic eyes of his. I heard a voice in my head, and I could instantly tell it was Krusty. And remember, always play ball! Suddenly the robot went limp and lifeless again. I ran to get an employee, and the animatronic was missing. Upon arriving home, I did some research and found the stories about Brian and Emily. I haven't gone insane yet like they did. Apparently whatever Krusty does to people to drive them crazy didn't affect me. But I still must warn you, next time you go to Chuck E. Cheese, beware. Krusty could be lurking nearby with his signature baseball bat in hand.